It all began 15 billion years ago, with a small spot. Here, all matter was in one place and one place only. It was all compacted together into one tiny volume, and it was known as the singularity. It was very, very tiny, theorized to be the same size of a pencil tip. But don't let size fool you, for it held a massive amount of matter, and was more dense than anything you could imagine. Inside, everything was in a plasma state. It was extremely hot, very energetic, extremely active, radioactive, and unstable. Oh, what's this? Hey, assistant? Do you mind checking what's happening with the singularity? The singularity would explode, spreading out into all directions, spreading matter all over, and this would be known as the Big Bang Theory. You okay, assistant? Eventually, it collected and began to collect into separate regions of space. Now elsewhere, gas-like matter began to collect together, and gases began to cool, and some of these would condense, and gases would turn into both solids and liquids. All of these would form a region of dust, liquids, and gases, and would begin to take on a spiral shape, and form what we now know as the Milky Way galaxy. In the center of this spiral, a protosun formed. This was due to an accumulation of material in a more condensed location. Far from where the sun is, grains of solids would hit each other, and the collisions would lead to these solids enlarging. Once big enough, they'll go from being golf ball sized to becoming small rock bodies known as planetesimals. The planetesimals collided with tremendous frequency, as there were trillions of them. They would then coalesce and become larger, and due to its increased gravitational attraction force, more and more rocks would become attracted to the planetesimals, until it would become large enough to become a rocky planet. As the collisions kept coming, they would produce massive amounts of heat. This was due to the rock traveling at a speed of thousands of kilometers per hour, and each collision would melt the surface and turn it into molten rock. Welcome to early Earth. At this point in time, the Earth achieved a size that was about 50% larger than its present size. Also on the surface, it was a bubbly and hot planet with lava flowing continuously, and the surface temperature was in the high hundreds of degrees. Wait, before I forget, assistant, you did remember to put on your high temperature protection suit, right? Of course. Moving on, collisions would keep happening on the surface of the Earth, from either meteors or planetesimals. One of these collisions involved a massive planetesimal that smashed into the Earth and blasted away about 1/3 of the planet. The fragment would begin to float around the Earth and would coalesce to form a large rock that would remain in orbit around the Earth. Its rotation was now locked into the rotation of the Earth, so that one side remained always facing towards the Earth. This is how our moon was thought to have been produced. Glad to see you back, assistant. Please try not to... Now what's this? It appears to be vapor, more specifically, water vapor. But how is this possible, you ask? Allow me to explain. Inside the meteorites was water, and it is one of the many different minerals that made up the meteorites. These minerals that contain water are known as hydrates. When heat came into contact with the meteorite, the water contained inside was released as vapor and into the atmosphere of the Earth. But it's currently in a gas state, but it did have H2O in it. Over time, the number of collisions of meteorites smashed into the planet were reduced, and the planet began to cool down, and as a result, it hardened and thickened. When the crust hardened, heat was reduced from the surface, and the water vapor that had been scattered across the atmosphere was now able to condense. As a result, something amazing happened. It would begin to rain, and it would continue like this for about 4.7 to 4 billion years, and would cool the hot rocks and magma. After a long time, the Earth would be completely covered by water and had become a water planet. At some point in Earth's history, magma that was underneath cracks at the bottom of the ocean would solidify and poke high enough out of the ocean to form the very first land. The magma was coming from pipelines that connected it to the surface, and the amount of land continued to grow and enlarge. The first landmass was formed, and it is referred to as the Canadian Shield. As the years went on, more shields would form. Meanwhile, in the oceans, something interesting would happen. life would begin to appear in the oceans, making its first signs of life on Earth. Do you see them? No? Allow me to show you, assistant. Now do you see them? These are the first signs of life. These organisms were multicellular and were soft-body organisms that lived at the bottom of the seafloor. It was also thought that they were ancestors to creatures such as mollusks, worms, and jellyfish. The oceans would be brimming with life, and it was here where life would develop and evolve. But on land, it contained no living organisms for the longest time, and when it did, it was by algae, bacteriomats, and lichens. Around 560 million years ago, life would take a major turn in evolution. New and bizarre species of animals would flood the oceans of the world and would become some of the first large organisms to roam the planet. This would become what we know as the Cambrian explosion. Some creatures that lived during this time included trilobites, an extinct species of arthropod that was the most successful of all early animals. Opabinia, a species of arthropod that had 5 eyes whose mouth was positioned under its head. Hallucigenia, a genus of lobopodian that had a tubular body and 10 pairs of slender legs. And Anomalocaris, an extinct species of radiodont that could reach sizes of about 6 to 10 feet and was not only the largest species at the time, but the ocean's first predator. Strange. Where is it? Assistant, have you seen it by any... Okay, moving on. Millions of years would go by, and life would continue to evolve. Fish would appear for the first time during the Devonian period, and one such species that would inhabit this time period was the Dunkleosteus, an armored fish with large jaws that had a strong bite force. A few years later, during the Carboniferous period, life would find its way onto the surface, as well as seeded plants and other fauna. Here, the first reptiles would come to existence, and due to the high levels of oxygen, arthropods would grow to a massive size, such as Arthropleura, a species of millipede that can reach the size of about 8 feet. And finally, a few more million years later, the Permian period would occur. During this time period, the first dominant land reptiles would wander the lands. One such species was Dimetrodon, a large reptilian species that was the apex predator of the Permian period. Around 250 million years ago, one of the worst mass extinction events would occur. It would wipe out 90% of life on the planet, leaving most species extinct and some reduced in numbers. This would be known as the Permian mass extinction. One such species that survived the Permian mass extinction was reptiles, and for the next 20 million years, something amazing would happen. They would evolve, becoming quite larger. And while some would evolve into other types of reptilian creatures, such as Postosuchus and Lystrosaurus, most of them would evolve into what we now know as the dinosaurs. Well, assistant, that is the basics of the history of the Earth. Are you ready to go back home? Alright then, here we go. Here we are, assistant. Present-day Earth. I hope this trip has taught you a thing or two about the world and its... Assistant? What are you looking at? Nice going, assistant. I think you may have created an alternate timeline.